Hey YouTube, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to walk you through 5 big tips when it comes to food, our diet, when we're trying to get fat loss results. These 5 tips are going to help you massively when it comes to being consistent with your food intake when you're trying to drop body fat. And we know consistency is key. So if you've ever struggled with sticking to a diet or sticking to a certain nutrition when you try and drop body fat, then you need to listen up because these are going to help. If you do find this video helpful, please do drop a like. If you have any questions throughout, throw them down below. I'll get back to you. If you haven't subscribed, do go ahead and do so because the future videos are going to help you and your goal. Okay, number 1. We want to try and make sure our diet is high in protein for 2 main reasons. 1, if we're trying to drop body fat, the retention of muscle mass is key. Eating adequate protein is going to help with the retention of that muscle mass alongside stuff like weight training, sleep, but protein's going to play a part. So we want to make sure we're eating enough to ensure that we're doing all we can to retain muscle mass. An adequate amount of protein is anywhere from 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. Secondly, it's thought that protein is one of the most filling macronutrients. Now, when we're in a deficit and we're taking in less food than we're expending, chances are hunger is going to increase. And if hunger is increased and we're not doing all we can to manage that hunger, then all of a sudden we might find it harder to stick to the calories that we need to set ourselves to. And if we can't stick to the calories, we can't stick to that total overall intake target, then we might come out of that calorie deficit. So we need to make sure we're trying to manage hunger as best we can, and a way to do that is to have a high protein diet, because it's thought to be the most filling macronutrient and therefore helping curb that hunger. Number 2, in a similar fashion, we want to make sure the majority of our diet is full of high volume foods. So high volume foods being foods that typically look a lot, or in a sense take longer to actually eat, but are lower in calories. A good example of this will be vegetables. If you look at vegetables on the plate, typically they'll take up a large portion of it, especially if they're like leafy greens, for example. However, in relation to calories, they'll normally be quite low. Now, the benefit of having foods that are high in volume, low in calories, is that it helps manage hunger. Okay, because if it's high volume, it's going to take up a lot of space. That is just going to help make us feel fuller a lot quicker. Couple that with that also being low calories means that we can essentially eat more for less amount of calories within our diet. So that's going to help with managing hunger, but it's also going to help with just being sensible and clever about our calorie allowance. Okay, so if we're someone who has to eat a relatively low amount of calories, if we're smart about our food choices, in terms of volume, we can still eat quite a lot. Again, that's just going to help with being consistent with our diet and finding it a lot easier to stick to the target we have set for our total calorie allowance. Number 3, the 80-20 rule. Now, the 80-20 rule is simply 80% of our diet needs to be foods that are going to be more beneficial for our goal. Okay, so this might be stuff like we've just spoken about, high protein, high volume, high nutritious food. But then 20% of our diet being foods that might be, let's say, not as favourable for our goal, but foods that we also are likely going to enjoy. So this might be foods that are low in volume but higher in calories. Okay, classic example, sweets. Now, the reason why we want to make sure we're having 20% of this is because 1, these foods aren't directly going to stop you from achieving your goal. So it's important to keep foods that you still enjoy within your diet, because if you don't enjoy your diet, you're not going to be consistent with it. And then that leading on to the second point, that if our diet is just too restrictive, so we're cutting these things out, we're likely not going to stick to it for very long. Okay, so flexibility is important for adherence and consistency within nutrition. Okay, so this 80-20 rule allows the majority of our diet to be favorable for our goal, but then also part of our diet favorable for adherence and flexibility, and therefore consistency. Number 4, think of your calories as a weekly average. So if you're tracking calories, you have a calorie target set, think of that as an average across the week rather than necessarily day to day. Now, the reason why this is so beneficial is because if you then have days where you maybe go over your target, that isn't going to be an issue because you can essentially make up for it through the rest of the week by, let's say, reducing calories slightly over the next remaining days to bring you back on target on average across the week. Or if you know that you have, let's say, an event coming up where calories are likely going to go over, then in the days leading up to that, you can reduce calories to compensate for it. So again, on average across the week, you're hitting that weekly target. So thinking of calories as an average across the week rather than necessarily day to day, again, just gives you a little bit of flexibility with your calorie allowance to ensure that across a week, you're still hitting that target, which allows you to be flexible day to day. And then lastly, calorie timing. Now, what do I mean by calorie timing? This isn't going to be if you eat more calories at a certain time, you're going to lose fat better. Or if you eat calories at a certain time, you can't drop body fat. None of that. This is more to do with hunger management, okay? And what I typically find is that people, and you might be able to think about this now and bring up a time, is that people will typically have certain times in the day for whatever reason, maybe it's due to their routine and what they've got going on, where they find hunger is worse, okay? Where hunger is maybe harder to manage. And I think a simple tactic around that is you just trying to plan in more calories around that window. So you've essentially got more to eat when hunger is likely going to be higher. So let's say, for example, for whatever reason, your hunger is higher at lunchtime. You might try and save some calories by eating a little bit less early on in the day and at night in the evening. So you've got more food available for that lunchtime feeding. And what that now means is you can eat more, but still be within your calorie allowance around that hunger window, okay? If you didn't do that and you didn't save the calories, let's say either side of the lunchtime, but then you struggle to manage that hunger at that lunchtime period, all of a sudden our calories might go over for that day. And if this is a daily struggle, then all of a sudden, even across a week, we're still going to be struggling. So identify times in the day. You can even do this if there's potentially days where for whatever reason hunger is going to be higher, but you typically eat more. Find these sort of periods, whether that's through the day or through the week, where hunger is typically worse, and then you can plan your calorie allowance around those times. Again, just like all other points in this video, that's just going to help with consistency with our nutrition. So there you have it, 5 ways to help you with your food, nutrition, diet, whatever you want to call it, when it comes to fat loss. Hopefully you found those helpful. If you did, please do drop a like. If you do have any questions, throw them down below. I'll get back to you. And if you haven't already, please do go subscribe because it'll help me out a ton and it helps you keep up to date with future videos, which are going to help you and your goal. Take care. I'll catch you on the next one.